So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this session. And I'm pleased to welcome Ryan Gellert, General Manager EMEA at Patagonia, who will tell us a little bit about Patagonia's approach to circular economy. Let me tell you first that I'm very excited about this session. I have a personal passion for Patagonia for a lot, for many years, since reading Yvonne Chouinard's book, Let My People Go Surfing. So I'm very happy to have Patagonia on our conference today. So let me tell you a little bit more about Ryan. So in his role, he oversees all sales, marketing, sustainability, and operational initiatives of Patagonia throughout the EMEA region. He's based in the European headquarters in Amsterdam and leads a team who live and breathe the Patagonia mission statement: we are in business to save our home planet. An avid climber and backcountry snowboarder, Ryan has climbed and ridden throughout Asia, Europe, North America, Australia, the Middle East, and South Africa. He has extensive experience of working with direct action environmental groups, serving on the boards of Access Fund and Protect Our Winters. Prior to joining Patagonia, Ryan spent 15 years at the Black Diamond Equipment, where he held a number of roles, including Brand President, VP of Supply Chain Management, and Managing Director of Black Diamond Asia. He holds a JD from S.J. Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah, an MBA from Florida Institute of Technology, and BSBA in Finance from the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. So please welcome Ryan, and you are free to use the reaction at the bottom of your Zoom screen to express your appreciation. And after Ryan's presentation, you will be also allowed to ask questions. So to do that, you will just need to raise your hand. There is also this possibility in the chat. So please do that. And when we will see that you raise your hand, we will unmute you, and you will be able to ask your question directly to Ryan. So Ryan, over to you.
Right, thank you so much. And thank you guys for the opportunity. Karolina, I would just, in addition to saying thank you, let me also say if there's any problems with audio, video, slides, or otherwise, please cut me off. I'll try to keep to 10, maybe 15 minutes tops in presentation, and then leave the rest of the time for Q&A. I'd be very happy to take questions on any topic. Really honored to be here with you guys. And I guess I'll kick it off by saying this. We're here to talk about circular economy initiatives. I think that it's probably less relevant for me to jump right into how we think about that without giving you just a brief who we are, what we believe in our history. So I'll do that, but I'll do it very briefly. And then I would really like to take an opportunity to close after I talk about the history piece, circular economy piece, how we think about it, just with how we're thinking about the future in this, pretty unprecedented time, not just with the pandemic, but the underlying issues with the health of the planet. So with that, I will kick it off. So this is the gentleman who started the company. His name is Yvonne Chouinard. His first foray into business, he was a self-taught blacksmith, and he was hand forging climbing equipment for himself, his friends, and a small community of climbers, primarily in North America at first, and then globally, who were doing first ascents and pioneering routes on some of the big ranges and rock walls around the world. Fast forward to 1973, and he started importing clothing from the UK for climbers, and that was really the birth of Patagonia. And then you fast forward to today, 47 years after the founding of Patagonia, the company is still owned by Yvonne and his family. We became a B Corp in 2011. We've got sales and staff around the world, so we're very much a global organization now. In revenue, well over $1 billion annually. And then for me personally, I joined Patagonia about 5.5 years ago. Karolina mentioned in the intro that I joined from a company called Black Diamond. The whole story sort of goes full circle because Chouinard Equipment, Yvonne's first company, became ultimately Black Diamond. And so I spent the better part of my career there before joining Patagonia. And that really brings us, it's a very superficial sort of pass on the quick history of Patagonia, but that kind of brings us to today. And over our first 40 years, we built a nice business, a much bigger business than I think Yvonne ever intended. Again, this is somebody whose first step into business was as a self-taught blacksmith. He never had big ambitions about building a global business. He sort of stumbled into that. And as we built that business over the last 4.5, nearly 5 decades, we've tackled some of the most complex problems in our own supply chain. And we've worked very hard to try to scale anything that we've learned along the way to others that are in similar industry. And we've given away well over $100 million to small grassroots organizations who are working to protect clean air, clean water, clean soil, and the ongoing protection of wild places. But I think what we've come to understand is none of what we've been up to for the last 47 years, internally or externally, is nearly enough. Our natural systems are collapsing. The overall health of the planet is moving in the wrong direction. And in many cases, it's doing so faster than scientists and other experts thought possible, even in recent years. And so I think if we're really honest with ourselves and we measure the value of Patagonia and our impact, not on how much product we sell or how financially healthy we are, but instead on the impact that we're having on the planet, I don't think we're very happy with where we've gotten to. And so in recent years, we have moved from supporting activists with our money, with our voice, with our people, to becoming much more directly involved in activism ourselves. If you have questions on what that means, I'm happy to answer them later. But again, given the focus on circularity here, I think I'll continue to move forward. But I will close out this piece of it just by saying that in 2018, we had a mission statement for 27 years that really guided all of the decisions that we made. And in 2018, because of the environment that I described a moment ago, just really feeling like the overall health of the planet was moving in the wrong direction, we stripped away our old mission statement and we replaced it with this one, which is simply, we're in business to save our home planet. And the ambition is that we use every part of the business and every single person who not only works within the business, but who supports the business to pull in the same direction. And so with that, I'll pivot over into, I'll sort of unpack our thinking around product circularity. And I'll start with maybe this overarching theme. For us, circularity kind of fits in within activism and minimizing our own footprint and a host of other initiatives that we're very committed to. We internally reference the whole body of work under product circularity under an umbrella term called wornware. And so wornware is something that we use internally, but it's also a customer-facing sort of umbrella term. And for us, there's 4 R's in wornware. The first is reduce. And this ad that we ran as a full-page ad on Black Friday in the New York Times in 2011, I think kind of demonstrates our ambition around reduce. The tagline, you can see, "Don't buy this jacket." The photo in the middle is a photo of what was at the time in 2011 our best-selling jacket. And then the text underneath, this ad has had a lot longer lifespan than we had anticipated. It's referenced a lot in business schools and marketing classes. And people always call it, the "Don't buy this jacket" ad. But really, I think the value of this ad is in the block text beneath. And without reading it, what it was really intended to communicate to people was we work very, very hard using the best technology we know how to minimize the impact of everything we make. And even in doing so, buying a jacket like this from us that you don't need has an impact on the planet, and the amount of water that's used to create it, the amount of excess material, waste material that spends off, and the greenhouse gas emissions that it contributes to. And so we really wanted people to stop and think, and we chose Black Friday, of course, very deliberately, about the impact of their purchasing decisions. So again, under this idea of wornware, the first R is around reduce. The second R is around product repair. And product repair is very intentionally focused on helping our customers keep their product in use as long as possible. And so we have always felt like through the sale of product, but also in other ways that we work with our community, that we're in partnership with our community and we're in partnership with our customers. And product repair is something we've been committed to since the early days. It's good for Patagonia, and then it gives us great intel on how our product performs in real life. And so we can make design decisions based on the feedback that we get. But we like to think that it's a great service also to our customers as well, because we stand by everything we make. We have an Ironclad Guarantee, which is in essence a lifetime guarantee for all of the product we make. And we are committed to partnering with our customers in keeping their product in use as long as possible. We run North America's largest outdoor apparel repair facility in Reno, Nevada. I think we probably do about 60,000 repairs a year there now. We run or partner with repair facilities across Europe here. We run our own in Japan. And then we do repair both on the road to kind of highlight the opportunity, the need, and the ability for people to repair their own product. And we also do a lot of education with our customers about how to do simple product repairs. And so, the first R under OneWare for us is reduce. The second is repair. And then the third is reuse. And that is if a customer has a Patagonia product, and whether it's in need of repair or not, they have decided that they are done with that product, but that product has usable life left in it, then we will buy that product back from our customers, and they can get it to us two ways. One is bring it into one of our retail stores, and another is send it to us in the mail. This is a service that is only active right now in the US. We're working out the logistics of bringing it to Europe and elsewhere. But this is the third piece, reuse. We want to keep that product in use as long as possible. So customers give it back to us. We will launder it, repair it as needed, resell it, and we will give them a credit towards buying something else if that's what they're looking to do. And then finally, the fourth R of OneWare, and is very intentionally, much like reduce is the first one by intention, the fourth, recycle, is also sitting at the end of those four, also by intention. I think there's a lot of companies in the apparel space that are trying to convince customers that if something is made with organic cotton or more responsible materials, or if they recycle it at the end of life, that's, there's no real impact of their consumption decisions. And I think we all know that that's very far from the truth. And so buying product, using product, and then sending it in for recycling still has a significant impact on the planet. And so we see it as don't buy what you don't need, keep your product in use as long as possible, let us help you do the same if you're done with it. And then finally, at the end of life, let's make sure that we're recycling it using the best existing technology. And so that's the reason we will take responsibility for 100% of the product that we make at the end of life. You can bring it into one of our retail stores, you can send it to us, and we will recycle it using the best existing technology. We also make investments in trying to develop new recycling technologies through our internal venture capital fund called Tenshed Ventures. So that's another piece of it as well. We're moving past, so that's really OneWare. I think, those four R's, but we're also kind of adding other elements to it. We've long since used recycled content in our product line, but we're really committed now to scaling that at a level that we've not traditionally been able to do. And so with our current product line, we have about 72%, not by styles, but measured by content. So that's 72% of the fabrics used in our current product line that are made of recycled content. Our ambition, of course, is to get that to 100%, just like our ambition is to get our commitment to fair trade certification to 100% of our styles. And where we're not using synthetic materials, but instead we're using organic or natural materials, our ambition ultimately is to get beyond organic. We have used only organic cotton since 1996, so that's 24 years now. But we're really trying to pioneer the movement to beyond organic, which is a regenerative organic standard. So that's kind of the next evolution in where we're trying to get. And then, so that's a very sort of quick and superficial pass on the circularity piece and how we think about that partnership with ourselves and our customers and community. I just want to close it out now with talking to you about directionally and kind of foundationally, what are the big things we're thinking about in the future. So this goes beyond the strict brief here about circularity, but I do think it's a really important piece of context as we then move and open it up for questions. So we've got four big focus areas. as we think about the future. The first is one that I think you guys would be very familiar hearing from other companies, which is decarbonizing our business. We are committed to decarbonizing our business by 2025. For us, that is beyond just offices, retail stores, and warehouses, facilities. That is down to the depths of our supply chain. So that is down to the mill level for factories that make our fabrics, and down to the farm level where those materials are organic in nature. Our industry is a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and we not only want to clean up our own act in the process of decarbonizing our business, we want to prove to other businesses, particularly in the apparel space, that the same things are possible for them as well. Number two, we are heavily involved in trying to participate in the transition in changing the way that our food is grown. And I know that many people ask, what is an American clothing company doing, talking about food systems in Europe? The reality is this, as we see it, the global supply chain for food is the most broken in the world. And unlike many broken supply chains, if we get this one right, we really believe that there's an opportunity to make the global supply chain for food a net positive one. And that's through the principles of regenerative organic agriculture. Organic basically being do less harm, don't use synthetic insecticides, herbicides, and pesticides. But the regenerative pieces are using those practices to create healthy topsoil and sequester atmospheric carbon. And so we are working with a number of small leasehold farmers in India on cotton pilots, and we're rolling that out into product now. And we want to continue to scale that, but ultimately with the belief that we can bring product to market, that the creation of those materials is actually a net positive. An ambitious goal, one that's going to take many years to work through and then scale, but that's what we're doing within our supply chain, and we're participating in the conversation in trying to change the way that food is grown and really change that system. Number three is doing something similar in the energy space. We really want to participate, particularly here in Europe, in scaling not just the use of renewable energy, but the use of decentralized community-based energy co-ops. And so the European Union has put forth legislation that addresses that issue. It is now in the hands of member states to figure out how to enact, and we want to participate in that conversation, to participate in that conversion. About 1 million European citizens today are part of renewable energy co-ops. We think that number can scale up to about 120 million, and that's, again, the ambition that we're pursuing here in Europe. And then finally, it's the ongoing protection of wild places. This has been central to Patagonia's business and reason for being for our entire 47-year history, and we continue to feel that this is, absolutely critical to our future, both as a place to play and enjoy, but also as natural carbon sinks. So in closing, I'll say this, our ambition is to be in business 100 years from now on a living planet with healthy customers. And we believe we've got roughly a decade to stabilize our climate. And so our ambition is to clean up our own act, continue to challenge ourselves and improve our business, and also at the same time scale solutions and open source them and change the fundamental systems that underlie society to make them as light on their impact on the planet as possible. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here to share this really brief summary of Patagonia, and I'd be happy to take questions for the balance of time we have together.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for providing us with this overview of Patagonia's effort. We have lots of questions coming in the chat, so I'm going to read two, but I also would like to invite the participants to raise their hands, because they will be able to ask the questions, they will be able to voice them. So you can find the raise your hand button in the participant box. So let me just first pick up a few questions from the chat, and then we will move to the live questions. So there are many questions about, for example, what are the biggest challenges moving to a circular economy model right now? And for example, another question also is, what do you feel is the impact of the current crisis? Is this going to have an impact on the general public to change their consumer habits, and what this might mean for Patagonia, a worn wear program, for example?
Yeah, maybe I'm going to start with that second question, but I'll do my best to address both, and certainly remind me if I've missed something. I think on that second question, the current events, first of all, as I mentioned, we're a privately held company, and we're privately held and fully owned 100% by Yvon and his family, the same people that started the company, which I think puts us in a really unique and advantageous position as it relates to our mission and delivering on our mission, because we don't have to report to public markets. We don't have to ask permission from a sort of a third party, a board of directors, investment community, or otherwise. And so if it's important to the owners, it's important to us, and we can focus on that mission. I think, the company's got a 47-year history, and I think for a long time, a lot of employees internally joke that the only thing keeping Patagonia from being, whether it was a 300 or 500 or $1 billion business, was Patagonia. Because, just growing the business was never really the ambition. I think in the last 5-6 years, a couple of things have happened. One is, within the apparel space, sometimes there's trends that you're very challenged to control. If you want to create them, that can be difficult. If you want to slow them down, that can be equally difficult. And for whatever set of reasons, I think Patagonia has been kind of more on trend in the last handful of years than it had been through most of its history. And so I think as a result, we had seen a lot more growth than in many ways we were really comfortable with. And I think that's had an impact, not all of it positive. I think the positive part of that, and this is the piece that we kind of worked to enable a bit, was we did feel like if we wanted to scale solutions to problems, being more visible and having more resource could give us a seat at different tables and allow us to have more influence. While I think there's a truth to that, I think what we're really discussing right now as a result of this pandemic is, how big is too big? How big is the right size for us in this current environment, but maybe even more generally? And so there was actually a piece in the New York Times yesterday about Patagonia. It was an interview with our CEO, Rose Marcario. And if you have an interest, I'd suggest reading it, because it gives you a little bit of sense of this tension point, not just decisions we're making through this pandemic, but, some midterm thinking that we're doing on these topics. But I think in short, what I would say, because I think part of that question was around the impact on OneWear, but maybe it was also the impact on Patagonia. I would say we're really asking ourselves, what's the right size for Patagonia? And I think the right size for the next couple of years at a minimum is smaller than we were a year ago. We absolutely expect, are planning to, and are managing the business to go backwards in 2020 from the size that we were in 2019. And now to the follow-up piece of that question, which was around OneWear and the ambitions through this period of time. I think I believe personally that a company, a little bit like a person, should be willing to rethink everything about itself every day, except for its reason for being and its values. And I think we have a pretty strong sense of what our values are, but the world changes. It's a dynamic place, and I think to stay relevant, you've got to continue to ask yourselves tough questions and be nimble. And I think that applying that to this current environment, what we're doing is saying, of all the things we believe and all the things we're focused on, what are the most important ones? And I think that decarbonizing our business, participating in the conversation around food, doing so in the conversation around energy co-ops here in Europe, and the ongoing protection of wild places are really central to they are our reason for being. Some of the other things that I alluded to but didn't mention in detail are, since 1985, we've given 1% of revenue to small grassroots organizations working on the topics of clean air, water, and soil that I mentioned. That commitment stays with us through good times and bad. We're going backwards this year, but we will still honor that commitment. We are the largest apparel company in the world as far as participation and commitment to fair trade certification. That stays central. And then so does OneWear, so does product repair. That's something we're talking about quite a bit through our social channels right now. And that's not just talking about the ideas, but teaching people and running clinics on how to repair a zipper and how to do some of those other things. So I think during tough times like this, we really want to double down on those things, not the opposite, which is maybe what people would expect, from a for-profit business.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you for mentioning the article. We are going to certainly try to find it and maybe share with the participants here. And also wanted to add that in the next two parallel sessions, we will also have Danone, and they will be also sharing many insights on their approach to circular economy and their views on how the food system is working now, or maybe better said, not working, and what their suggestions are to make it more circular and actually better for our economy and livelihoods as well. So now I'm going to bring up some questions from the audience. When I ask you to speak, please state your name and surname, and as well as the position and the institutions that you're representing. So I will unmute now Nancy Boken.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. My name is Nancy. I'm a professor in sustainable business at Maastricht University, the Netherlands, amongst others. So my question was really, Patagonia has done such impressive work in the past and really leading the way in its own sector, but also even other sectors. And others are now catching up, for instance, with organic cotton, better sourcing, etc. Even more mass-scale companies like H&M are trying to do that through better cotton, for instance. Where does Patagonia feel in particular that it can contribute to shifting the dial even further? You already mentioned, for instance, regenerative agriculture, but is it also the slowing down consumption angle where you think you can make a change? And I would really like to have your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Nancy. Let me just say quickly to the point, Karolina, that you made about Danone, and I know Interface is also participating in this. Those are two great brands, and both of which we've got, informal and in some cases semi-formal relationships with. So particularly on the food topic, Danone is one we have a lot of conversations and partnership with. So just want to mention that. Nancy, to your question, I share a couple of things with you. One is, and I'll be really honest about this, I think that there are many companies out there in the world who are, regardless of what their past history has been, have a really deep commitment, whether they, sort of found religion last year or they've been working towards this quietly for a long time, whatever the situation is, and I'm not being judgmental on that. I think whatever brings you to thinking about doing things in a better way, as long as the commitment runs deep and it's not something that you're seeing as, if we've got €1 to spend on this, how do we, some companies are, how do we spend 10 euro cents on doing the right thing and 90 euro cents telling the world we've done it? I'll be honest with you, I don't have a lot of time for companies like that. And I think we all have our own opinions on, how different companies are navigating in a world that I do think is looking for purpose, particularly in the apparel sector, but not in any way limited to that. I think there's a special ring in hell reserved for, oil and gas companies who, through airports, and you look at their advertising on the walls, and you would think by the things they're saying that climate change is solved, and you can thank Shell for that. I think that it runs on a spectrum from companies that were formed with this central to the reason for being, to companies that are starting to try to inject it, but the starting place is a really authentic one into their reason for being, and then companies, candidly, that I think are really disingenuous about this. You mentioned in the apparel sector, and I would say, first of all, it is absolutely fantastic when any company in any sector, including apparel, whatever is driving them there is really finding a deep commitment to doing things differently. I think, conversely, as I've said, trying to do that in a way that is participating in an honest conversation with their communities and customers, I think is a really critical piece. One of the things that does frustrate me quite a bit is the creation of a lot of different language and a lot of different standards, which I think often is done very intentionally to create confusion. And then on the food piece, often people think that we are speaking about regenerative agriculture. I just want to be very careful here. There are a lot of people working on topics of regenerative agriculture. For us, we're talking about regenerative organic agriculture, and I think it's an important distinction because we feel like the principles of the organic movement are really important. They were, they are, and they'll continue to be. That's doing less harm in the process. Regenerative added on top of that is honoring every one of those commitments and then layering on top of it others. And I feel like that additive process is a really important distinction. But I think to the heart of your question, you know, where do we feel like we can add more in a world where there's a lot of momentum around these things? Yeah, there's a lot more noise. We're just going to continue to do the things we do, but I think that our focus is going to be on changing systems. And I will tell you that if we score ourselves 47 years into this experiment called Patagonia, we're not too pleased with our ability to change systems, you know, and I'll lean back on organic cotton again. In 1996, we committed to never using again traditionally grown cotton, and it almost put us out of business. But we made that decision because we had seen firsthand the impacts of conventionally grown cotton, particularly as our product, Patagonia product, was off-gassing formaldehyde in a new retail store that we opened in Boston, Massachusetts. And that sort of put us on this journey of understanding the impact of traditionally grown cotton on the landscape and on people. So we've never used it in 24 years. And at the time we made that transition, less than 1% of the world's cotton was organically grown. Fast forward 24 years, to your point, organic cotton is kind of a talking point within the apparel sector. Well, today, less than 1% of the world's cotton is organically grown. So we can pat ourselves on the back for being early in that, or we can get really honest with ourselves about the fact that we haven't changed the system. And so I think in answer to the question, as long-winded as I've been, our commitment continues to be fundamentally changing systems where we can. And I do think what we've come to realize is we can't do that alone. We're not important enough, we're not big enough, we don't have that level of influence. So we do need to find like-minded organizations, businesses, and hopefully politicians as well, and participate collectively in trying to accomplish these things.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Before moving to the next question, I will just try to stop your presentation so that we'll be able to see you talking. Okay, like this, perfect. And now I would like to invite a question from Wayne Visser. I will just unmute yourself unmute you in a second.
Ryan, thank you. No, I think you can hear me. Thanks for the presentation. I'm Wayne Visser. I am with Cambridge University and Antwerp Management School. My question was really about what you've learned about the sustainability of materials. Specifically, is it better for textiles to go bio-based and biodegradable or synthetic and recyclable?
That's a great question, and I think that I wish I could give you a really simple answer and say we've done the research and here's the answer. I think the reality is quite complex, and let me give you a quick story and then I'll unpack that a little bit more. We pioneered the use of recycled PET from plastic bottles in fibers back in the mid-90s. And actually, we were unable at the time that we started doing that. We were using a lot of Sprite soda bottles. And one of the things we couldn't do at the time, thankfully, we figured out how to do sense, was get the color green out of a Sprite bottle as it was converted into fabric. And so our original products only came in one color, and it wasn't a very attractive one. You know, that again, this is going to sound familiar to the cotton story. We can pat ourselves on the back for being very progressive and ahead of the curve 25 or so years ago in figuring out how to do that. You fast forward to today, and probably, you know, most, if not all of you on this call know that this issue of microplastics and microfibers that are showing up in the natural environment, we're contributing to that as Patagonia through the use of synthetic materials and you know, some of the same things that we thought were solving a problem. As we've come to understand more, we realize we're contributing to a different set of problems. So I think that, you know, I think our advice to ourselves is, number one, be relentlessly honest with yourselves about the impact that you're having. And number two, understand that as soon as you solve one problem, all it does is give you an invitation to a bigger set of problems. And I think that's the starting place in answer to your question. I think, you know, one of the unique challenges of our business being in the apparel sector, not just a participant in the sector, but the kind of apparel we make, which is largely technical apparel for snow sports and climbing and surfing in cold water and doing some of these other things, is there's some pretty demanding requirements, performance requirements on the product. And so another hot topic in the apparel sector is the use of chemicals, DWR, durable water repellency, and the impacts that that chemistry has. And it'd be very easy for us to exit the current technologies and some of the questionable chemistries, and we're working very hard to do that. The flip side is, if in doing that, the product doesn't perform, it becomes relatively useless. Or if the product is not durable and does not last, it has a different set of environmental impacts. And so it's this constant learning curve of saying, what do we believe are the biggest, most challenging problems? What can we do to solve them? And then as soon as we've done that, what's the next set of problems? Because we know they're there. And so I think that I know I'm giving you a real non-answer to your semi-specific question about, alternatives between materials and bio-based and so forth. But it's because I don't think that there's simple answers right now. I do think in the future, a never-ending escalation of the standards that we have for ourselves are going to be required in apparel, like they're going to be required in almost every industry, particularly across consumer goods. And I think all of that is going to have to be mated with a real correction in the pace at which we consume as humans, particularly in the Western world. And, I want to be careful about trying to put a positive spin on this current environment, but I do think the fact that we're all sort of spending a lot more time at home, less shopping, less traveling, and a little more time thinking has us all a little more introspective about what it is that's most important in life, and also as part of that, how much we need. And I do think that that's important.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Before I pull up the next question, there were some questions in the WOWOW app regarding measurement. Since you just mentioned something about impact in your answer, could you just share a little bit how do you identify Patagonia's impacts and how do you measure it, and even your approach to circularity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mixed. I guess, it seems like I'm starting every answer with a little bit of a story, but I think it maybe grounds in the unique reality of Patagonia, because it is a little bit of a unique company. And I think mostly it's a unique company because of its ownership. Again, as I started, it's founded and owned by someone who did not intend to start a large, successful business. And as part of that narrative, I would tell you that Yvon, our founder and owner, he doesn't own a mobile phone. He doesn't own a laptop or a computer. That's not how he functions. And so when people think about a $1 billion plus business that's global in nature, you think about a lot of spreadsheets and financial metrics and other ways of measuring things. We have those, of course. I think they're required. But the flip side is our starting place is not wanting to build spreadsheets that have attractive numbers. It's more about we want to deliver product that we're very proud of and drive impact in ways that we feel are appropriate. And so we do take a little bit of a contrarian point of view to that. I think as a result of that over our history, I think probably for a long time it was focusing on the biggest, most visible problems. And sometimes they weren't problems on our list until they became problems on our list pretty quickly. I mentioned the cotton story, which came from a store in Boston. So that was not an initiative we were thinking about for 3 years. That was an initiative that popped up. Yvon dug into it and said, I'm out of the business of using traditionally grown cotton. You have 18 months to convert the business. And the response was, it can't be done. And he said, well, you're wasting time because you got 18 months. And so there's a little bit of that within the business as well. I think as we've gotten bigger, as the challenges have gotten larger as well, we have moved more towards real scientific metrics. And I think our carbon footprint is probably the best current example of that, where we have said, number one, we have got to decarbonize our business. And number two, if we're going to make that statement and commitment to ourselves, we've got to really understand what is driving that. And so I think that's probably the single best piece of work I could hold up, is us really getting our hands around a problem as we then build a roadmap to address it. But we do the same in other parts of our business, certainly the use of recycled materials in other areas. And then there's problems that I think we still feel like really defy our ability to measure them right now, but we know they're very significant problems. And maybe microplastics is the best, microfibers and plastics is the best current example that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we have a question from Tim Cooper. So I will unmute Tim.
Hello there. Thank you for that presentation. Very interesting and inspiring. My question is a bit technical. It's to do with recycling. People talk about 100% recycling, just they talk about carbon free. I'm just wondering whether technically you think it's possible to actually have 100% recycling, because I've heard some scientists argue that you need to have some virgin fiber to maintain the quality over time. What's your take on that?
I think it's incredibly difficult to imagine a world where you can take a single item, a jacket, a technical jacket, and convert it at end of life to a new technical jacket and reuse all of the materials. I find that very, very difficult to imagine. Unfortunately, the state of recycling and optimizing recycled materials right now in the apparel sector is pretty immature. I think I mentioned this before, but we make some investments through our internal venture capital fund in small startups that are trying to solve some of those problems. So it's an area that we're not just waiting for solutions, we're pretty actively trying to find them and invest and scale them. But it's a really big challenge. My personal belief, and then I'll add to that also, by the way, that, I talked about the use of recycled materials in our product line and everything else. There are cases, many of them, where within our business, there's conflicting ambitions or conflicting realities where the use of recycled materials actually creates more greenhouse gas emissions than using virgin materials. And that's a really perverse reality. And so I just think that this whole thing is a cycle that, again, I don't feel like we've ever as a brand really functioned very well in a soundbite society, because every one of these questions have really complex answers. And I think what we've got to be is super committed to honest answers and transparent answers, not quick and easy answers. My quick and easy answer to a very complex question would be, I actually think that there is a better chance that we get to a higher percentage of products that can break down safely at the end of life, maybe be compostable or some version of that, then we get to one where it's this one-to-one circularity within the apparel sector. That's a really difficult scenario for me to imagine. I think we can continue to get better, but getting that good is very difficult to imagine.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your question, Tim, and for your answer, Ryan. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question live? If not, I'm going to just pull up one more from the chat.
And just as you're doing that, let me just say real quick, we've got a really short time together, and it always feels weird doing this digitally. I certainly prefer to do it in person. But, the one thing I just really want to make sure comes through clearly is, we're as imperfect as anybody out there. We're deeply, deeply committed to using our business, its reputation, its voice, its people, its money, our supply chain and other things to have an impact on the natural world. That's not a marketing statement. That's really our philosophy and our commitment. But we've got tons of problems that we are continuing to wrestle with. We contribute to some every day, and we are very clear-eyed about the fact that the world would be better off without Patagonia in it as it relates to having an impact, a footprint on the planet. And we're just continuing to try to chip away at that and work to become better. So people often describe us as a sustainable business. We're not a sustainable business. I think the definition of sustainable is quite clear. And after 47 years, we don't yet meet it. That's the ambition, that's the aspiration. But the point I want to make is just one of a deep level of humility. And I fear sometimes that maybe that doesn't come through as I'm just sharing with you some of the things we're working on. So I just want to make sure to mention that.
So we have some follow-up questions. I think that this is actually a great one to talk a little bit about more the current situation. So follow-up question, perhaps on the former question of Nancy Boken. Do you see systemic change at odds with the possibility to reduce the business post-COVID?
Do I see systemic changes at odds with us getting smaller? I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Maybe Nancy, you could just jump in and help me. I just want to make sure I'm answering the question as you intended.
Hi, sorry, I'm realizing that it's also a bit rude that I didn't have my camera on. I'm not sure whether you can see me, but
I can.
you had a very good remark earlier on post COVID as well, and the idea to potentially reduce the business, and that was a New York Times article as well, challenging your own growth records over time, and at the same time your future trajectory is focused on creating that systemic change. You mentioned the challenges, only 1% of the world is using organic cotton. Right. How do you see, isn't that like a tension between trying to grow your impact systemically and while reducing the business, or do you see those go hand in hand potentially?
I think that it's really nonlinear. I think we have used growth as a reason and an enabler. Sorry, we have used impact as a reason and enabler to justify growth quite a bit in the last 5, 6, 7 years. I don't feel like we need to apologize to ourselves or the world for having done so, but I don't believe that that logic holds up indefinitely. And so I feel like probably the strongest position we can operate from relative to the size of our business and the size of our ambitions on impact is running our business as responsibly as we can in the environment in which we exist. And I think if we get addicted to growth for growth's sake, and it's very easy to say we're not, but you know, the proof is in how you behave under good times and bad, when you have a tailwind, a headwind, or no wind. And I feel like right now, you know, the world is saying, and I said to you more on a human level than a Patagonia level, hey, we all need to stop, take a deep breath, and really ask ourselves, in our case, how many jackets do you need? Because we don't make product that people need. You know, we're talking a lot about essential services right now. We are not one of them. And we're clear-eyed about that. And so in a world like we're living in today, where, you know, on a human level, I'm saying we just don't, you know, we don't need to go out and buy more clothes right now. Can we responsibly continue to push more product out there? And if we make the product, we've got to find a home for it. You know, we're not going to burn it. It's got to be sold. And so that starts kind of turning this flywheel that at times can be very difficult to stop. And so in answer to your question, you know, can we have more impact if we've got a bigger revenue number to attach to our introduction? Yeah, I guess we can on one way. But I think people that really know us, and you know, the ambition is that people have more than just a superficial understanding of what we're trying to accomplish and how we can work together to do that. You know, maybe have a little bit more visibility to the arc of time. When growth seemed appropriate, we grew. When it seemed less appropriate, we were willing to step back. And we're constantly asking ourselves, what's the right size? And how do we use whatever that number is and whatever our resources are to accomplish our bigger goals? So I always feel like it's a really nuanced criteria for us to work with.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we are approaching the end of this session, and of course, thank you so much, Ryan, for being here and for your presentation and answering the questions from our community. We hope that you enjoyed it as well, and that this could lead to maybe some collaboration between the research and education community and Patagonia and other companies that are involved in sustainability and circular economy. I would like to thank all the participants as well for all their questions and active participation. I would like also to say that the link for the next session has been sent to you yesterday, and also in a reminder about half an hour ago. So I thank you very much, and I will see you in the upcoming session. Thank you so much, Ryan, again.
Thank you all very much. Good luck and stay safe. Bye-bye.